Hello, Metatopia. I'm Avonelle Wing, and I am here with our panel to discuss retail insight into pandemic product planning. I have two brilliant retailers and some of my favorite people in the industry here with me. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, though, so I'm going to start with Jennifer with Crazy Squirrel Games.
I'm Jennifer Ward. I've owned Crazy Squirrel Game Store now for just over 11 years. We just had our anniversary 2 weeks ago.
Yay.
I know, very excited about that. We're in Fresno, California. That's the part of California nobody's ever heard about unless you live here. We're an agricultural community. Fresno County has about 1 million people in it, so that's the community I serve. Although we have a very large English as a second language population, as well as one of the densest concentration of poverty in the United States. So
Wow.
sounds like a big place, operates as a smaller place, and it definitely goes to our product selection and how much we purchase. Previous to my life as a retailer, I was an assistant managing editor for online news at the Fresno Bee, which just means I used to be a programmer, but I came into this job as a manager, so at least I had some managerial skills and some uh, finance skills, although they were the weakest probably.
Gotcha. All right, Scotia.
I'm Scotia Buchan. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. We also just celebrated our over 7 years. And moved 6.5 months ago to what we're hoping is our forever home. So we now have almost 4,000 square feet of retail, as well as 3,000 square feet of warehouse, where before we had about 100 square feet of warehouse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
I'm very jealous.
It's been a very big change. It's me and my partner in life and work who run the store. And we both have some background in retail and things, but mine is a manager with Kohl's Chapters and Indigo. So small format through medium to large format with the one company. There's only about last I checked, about 5 people in Canada who've actually done that because the switch in formats from small to large is very pronounced in that company. And so not a lot of people transition. And that's what actually brought me out to Winnipeg, was becoming a manager out here of one of the larger format stores. Our area, Winnipeg, there's one other technically city in the province that we're in, but basically it's the metropolis surrounded by fields as far as the eye can see. So we do get some out of town, like people coming into the city, just because there isn't a lot of anything else in the province. But we really focus on organized play. So the pandemic has been especially hard on us because prior to COVID, we were open 7 days a week, and we hosted 2 to 3 events every day.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've only been able to start hosting events in the last 2.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
So what the store looks like now between the move and post-pandemic is very different from what we have operated for the previous 6.5 years.
That's intense.
A little bit.
When
Yeah.
I am not running events, I coordinate the Double Exposures Envoy program, and we work with retailers every day and are a bridge for the conversation between publishers and retailers. And because of Metatopia, I spend a lot of time taking information that I gain from retailers and carrying it back to designers, because designing games that are useful and productive and that retailers feel like they can sell is an important part of the why we make games. And so I'm particularly excited for this conversation because Metatopia is a game design festival and does talk about the way I describe it is that we are a program for anyone who is passionate about the art, business of making, designing, selling, or playing games, right? And the selling part of that is the conduit from the publisher to the end user. I cannot imagine. I know how hard it's been to be this bridge position. Being a retailer during a pandemic just seems like it's been nonstop adjustment and change and flux. And then you add late stage capitalism, the collapse of shipping. People who are joining us, if you don't know, I'm going to give you like a 2 sentence summary of the situation, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer so that she can talk a little bit about how the situation is affecting the store, and then we'll bounce it to Scotia. So, pandemic, people couldn't leave their houses, needed to find a new way to get games to them. They stopped coming into the store. While this was happening, people started getting vaccinated. We started sneaking back out. All of a sudden, there's no shipping containers, and there's no truckers, and there's a microchip shortage, so you can't get new trucks when your truck dies. And if your truck dies, it may sit in a repair place for 6 months. I know people who are long-haul truckers who own their rigs, whose trucks are literally out of commission for 6 months right now because they can't get the parts to repair it because of a microchip shortage. Is that COVID? Is that late stage capitalism? We don't know, but everybody is on fire and slightly screwed. So now that I've done the speed run through why we are all on fire, everybody who sells games is having a year. Jennifer, do you want to talk a little bit about how this has specifically affected you?
Yeah, I mean, the speed run of our last 2 years, I came back from Gamma, which is a big industry trade show. I'm actually the retail division chair, so I talk to retailers all the time.
Mhm.
Came back excited about making changes. We had a staff meeting planned. That day, the state of California announced everybody who's not essential has to close. Our staff meeting turned into here's how you fill out unemployment paperwork, which was heartbreaking, right? We've
Yeah.
been open 9 years. I had a solid staff. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. So we were closed entirely for 2.5 to 3 months. Couldn't do any sales at all, which is a hit on your mental health if you're sitting there and you're like, I have to pay rent without making income. How am I going to do this thing?
Yep.
So we were fortunate that we had a bit of a war chest. We had an incredibly nice landlord who basically extended our lease, but then didn't make us pay rent while we were closed. And then when we could reopen a little bit, he only made us pay a portion of our rent. So we would have closed without that. We would have gone out of business 100%. No way I could have made it without that.
Wow.
Yeah, once we got over the initial shock, we spent time figuring out, okay, we don't know what's going to happen, but when we reopen, what we can do better. So we made a website. We'd never really done our inventory online because we focus on our local consumers. So I spent my days making shop so at least my local consumers could see what we have. That way, when we were allowed to do curbside pickup, we could do that a bit. But people just weren't shopping. There were other things to worry about. We're small, we could spin on a dime. We brought in more puzzles, we brought in more single player games, we brought in a lot more 2-player games. California opened in stages. The area of California that I am in is, let's say, vaccine hesitant. So it's hard. Our ICUs are still 90% full. We also have a large game room. We have about 2,500 feet of retail and about 2,000 feet of game space. We're currently limiting our game space to a third of our normal gaming capacity, which is great because since you can't get product, what you order, you have to order lots of. So now one of my private gaming spaces is actually a third storage room for us because we're packed to the gills at the store with what we can get. But it also means there's a lot of things like I was talking to Scotia earlier. I put in a giant order with one of our vendors for the holidays. And they just sent me an invoice for less than 20% of what I ordered. And I'm like, does that mean I won't be getting the rest of what I ordered? Or does that mean it's going to ship in waves? Like, do I need to go spend that money somewhere else? So there's and I've got 2 other giant orders out there with other companies that I don't know if they'll get fulfilled. Those companies don't know if they'll get fulfilled. I don't have a war chest anymore because I spent it all down when we were closed. So there's a lot of juggling money. There's a lot of what games are going to hit so I know to get those. I'm really hoping the publishers are not doing things they've done previously where they're like, we're going to release 12 new games in December. And I mean, we've had games release on December 20th before, and I'm like, that's not going to work this year. You can't do that.
Right.
And one of the things that we're probably going to say a couple times in the session is if you are a consumer and you want things for the holidays, no matter what holiday it is, especially if you have to ship it to somebody, you need to be buying and shipping right now.
If you haven't already
Like,
bought it, you're probably not getting it.
right. And if you, like, I know locally, my local FedEx warehouse says they're 5 days behind. The warehouse things come through to get to them says they're a week behind. I'm getting deliveries 2 or 3 weeks late, and that's only after publisher ships it. Publishers are shipping late because they're getting stuff late.
Right.
It's crazy right now.
Right. Envoy is advising our publishers that if they have not already gotten it into the distributor's hands, to just sit on it until February, because
Yeah.
retailers aren't going to be able to do anything with it.
Yeah, it's hard when you get stuff late in a normal year, but when you get stuff late in this kind of year where we're really trying to tell people like you need to shop now, if we don't get it, it's just going to be difficult to do anything at all with it.
Okay. Scotia, how about you?
So the big thing with us was we actually moved during the pandemic. And so that ended up being a saving grace because similar shutdowns and things like that, there was construction delays, but most of our consumers had to do curbside pickup and home delivery anyway. So we just said, we're still doing that because of construction. But it was one of those where because of the move, we had a rent-free grace period for moving in. And if that hadn't happened, we would have been done. So a lot of similar things to what Jennifer was mentioning, but also, yes, don't release new things like going into Christmas, but I'm also terrified that there's going to be no product. Like, yes, people should buy now because if they need to ship and things, but I'm worried that this is going to be our worst December ever because by the time we get there, there's not going to be anything. I'm already like the things that are coming out are so allocated. I was thankfully able to do like some bigger Christmas orders from some of my suppliers, and I now actually have a warehouse. But I'm also in a new store that is doing phenomenally well, so that's amazing. But I'm selling through a lot of my staples at a far higher rate, and I don't know if I can get any more. And so, how is it going to be when the people who only shop with me for Christmas annually because they have a gamer on their list come and I don't have anything to sell them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I can't imagine staring into a crystal ball and seeing that coming towards me. That does not sound like fun in any way.
It's pretty terrifying. We've been making sure to, like, one of the things, so the name is A Muse and Games, so I was really glad to hear you talking about, like, the art and stuff in the creative process, because that's always been part of our identity and homage and things is to really pay credit to the art that goes into making these games, because without it, they're nothing, but also selling locally made geekery. So we've got like vinyl decals and we've got pins that a couple local artists make, and we sell dice bags and masks, of course, now with like
yeah,
things.
Right.
But just trying to diversify into some of that, because as long as they're making things, at least I can fill in some of the stuff when it comes closer to the holidays. But yeah, prior to COVID, I had strict, like, this is when I order, this is when my shipments show up, this is when I reorder for these things. All of that is completely thrown out the window. And so there's lots of stuff where I'm like, okay, so I just sold out of this. It's going to take 2 to 3 weeks for me to get more players' handbooks on my shelf. Oh, God.
Right.
Or longer if they're stuck on a boat that's floating in the ocean and can't even get to the dock because of the longshoreman strike.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going
to
go ahead.
Some retailer friends and I have been sharing photos of our stock rooms with each other. That's how weird this year is, because we're like, how full is your stock room? Can you actually get to stuff? And it's like, is it full of the right things?
Right.
it's a weird year.
So I'm gonna ask a question that is everybody who knows me and has seen me work at a Gamma show is gonna roll their eyes and laugh at me because this is how I think. Okay, so I'm hearing that there's the possibility that there are going to be retailers sitting around going, I don't actually have things to sell. But it's also a pain in the ass right now to get product into the store because distributors have to fulfill it and then it needs to ship. So, Jennifer, is there something that Gamma is or can do to give publishers that have product, maybe some of the smaller publishers that have a solid track record of sellable product that maybe retailers don't know in a particular region, to connect with retailers who are discovering that their evergreens have worn a little thin and they need to bring something in for that gamer family that's going to be shopping on the 20th of December? How do we fix that?
There's a couple of things. Like Gamma's really been working on connecting publishers with retailers a lot more this year, plus just general education. So like one program that's new is the Build Better Sales program, where they're working with publishers to give them an hour video like this, where there will be retailers on the other end and they can physically show retailers how their games play. So you get a chance to see it, because I know a lot of people like me I need to see it before I know whether or not I want to do it. But also use the Gamma member page to promote some stuff there. If they want to connect to the GRD, like retailers talk to each other all the time. And if you think word of mouth is how my customers work, word of mouth is how your customers work as publishers. Retailers are gonna talk to each other and say, hey, did you see this game? You need to get copies of it. Somebody just pinged me today in a new Squirrel related product because my store name is Crazy Squirrel. And I was immediately like, where do you get that from? I'm probably gonna bring it in. So putting it out there, but also talking to retailers. Like we get a ton of emails. So emails are not always the solution. But it's understand that some distributors are having real problems right now. And if you think, oh, I've sold my game to a distributor, I'm good, I don't have to worry about it anymore, that is not the case, right? There are multiple times when I've gone to a distributor to restock on something and they're out, and then I reach out to the publisher and they're like, I've got a warehouse full of it, I don't understand. So sometimes you need to reach directly out to retailers. You can post on the Gamma member group. We're putting together the holiday hot list. I'm not sure what the deadlines were on that, but it's something we started a couple years ago where publishers can be like, hey, these are our top games. We package that all together for retailers to say, do you have these games? They're available now.
Awesome.
And don't get lost in the glut. Like this is the Firehose season. Like I consider November, December kind of the Firehose season of new games. And I know publishers think that it's good to get your game out right before Christmas, but there are dozens of new games that come out in that time, and there's no way to give all of them the proper attention that they need.
So, Scotia, is word of mouth the right way if a publisher is like, oh, maybe us?
So the big problem the difference for me is that most of the publishers, not all, but most of them are based in the US. So buying direct, I have to import, and the border is no bueno right now. Like it's things get stuck there for indeterminate amount of time because of all of the shipping delays and things. And there's constantly priority things coming through that they are told they have to deal with before. And so getting things through, and I can't cross the border. So I'm close enough to the border that prior to COVID, I would just, if they shipped continentally, I could drive down and pick it up. I'm like an hour and a half from the border. But I had to drive into the States and go get it. You can't drive in right now without getting a COVID test to come back. And that takes more than an hour to come back.
Right.
So it's not feasible. So I then have to pay a border broker to bring it up for me or ship it via whatever that's going to charge me atrocious import fees. And suddenly it's costed the game out. So that's not really an option for me. So it's needing to get the distributors to have stuff on hand. And I know that they're working, but they're so overwhelmed and behind, and lots of them are still working at reduced capacities, either because they can't find workers, because that's been a huge problem up here. Thankfully, our government was super duper good to all of the people who weren't employed and gave them nice big checks for a good chunk of COVID, which was amazing because people weren't out of their homes. But they sort of did a median that the vast majority of the people getting it weren't making before. And I can't suddenly afford to pay several dollars more an hour for unskilled labor to train them. And so I'm having employee shortages, but so are my distributors, because they're experiencing the same thing. They can't suddenly pay way more money than they were before to train somebody who's probably going to quit.
So I'm going to sidestep some of that because that also
Yes.
ties into living wages and cultural shifts and people being absolutely cheap about paying for board games, and we undercharge for our products. And there's a whole box of stuff there that I could speed run through, but I'm just going to set it to the side. It's interesting that there is some of what I'm hearing is that there's this Firehose season, and one of the things that I'm taking out of that people who are designing games and publishing games need to think about is that they need to have your attention before Halloween. If they think they want you selling their game for next Christmas season, they need to be talking to you in March at the Gamma Trade Show or in the spring, not in the fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the fall, I'm already making my solid decisions for the holiday, and if something new comes in, it's got to be spectacular, and it's got to come in at a time when I have time to read email about a new board game, and I haven't already budgeted out all my holiday shopping.
Right.
Well,
Honestly, I would suggest too for new publishers, like January is a huge month for us because everybody's coming in with their grandma money and their holiday money. January often does as well or better than December for us.
Wow.
And that's a time when I can also get new games in, because the people who come in with the gift cards are gamers. I can talk to them about new things. The people who come in December are moms and dads and grandparents. They don't know what they want. So
we've lost Jennifer for a moment.
Do you want to jump in?
I will. So my experience is a little bit different there, but I was so busy listening to her, I forgot what was the question.
We were talking about when to catch your attention for next holiday season.
So the other thing to keep in mind is that for me to get better terms and things from my distributors, I usually have to place Christmas orders, and they usually start soliciting that in August or September at the latest. If it's not a thing that is listed that I can order, then it doesn't make it onto my Christmas orders that are planned to be released. So, and the other thing is right now, everybody's failing to hit street dates and release dates so much. I can't take pre-orders from my customers on things because I don't want to be holding all of their money and then not have this thing show up for when they want it and having to do all of that. So for lots of stuff, I'm just not taking pre-orders, and I'll take names, but then people find it somewhere else, or they order it direct from the publisher or online. And so I'm out that money, but I'm like, I don't know when it's going to show up, and they don't like that answer.
Right. So I imagine that some of the pandemic programs like HABA's order from us and your retailer gets the credit for it ends up being really helpful in situations like that. Or no?
No, because that didn't make it into Canada. Well, at least not for us. That didn't make it into Canada much. Like, people just weren't aware of it as a thing. So
Got it.
It is a great idea. And I love publishers who tried it and who are doing it. It's not as effective as I think we all wish it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So how has I can speculate on some of this, but I'd love to hear, Scotia, how the games that you were bringing in, how has the balance of what you are selling shifted? And I know you moved, so some of this might be related to move, but
So during lockdown and during pandemic, there was definitely that focus on 1-player, 2-player, and things that could be done remotely. So we did a lot of like choose your own adventure from Z-Man, and roll and writes were huge because you could just scan the page and send it to people, and then everybody could play because they could play as many people as you needed, kind of thing. And so that has definitely been an uptick, and things like party games became non-existent. But it's also just been the demand for things that you can't get has gone up so much. So like Pokemon sales, whatever I can get is off the charts because I can only get like 2 boxes on a set. So
wow.
things. And before the pandemic, I could order what I needed of something plus a dozen if I thought it was going to be a hot seller, and I'd have taken pre-orders, and so knew as a smaller store that I could afford that outlay because it would sell in a reasonable amount of time. Now there's none there, and I'm not getting what I pre-ordered. I'm
Right.
getting allocated down, and so I don't know how much of something to order because every once in a while a publisher will come through and I'll get the full amount that I asked for. And I'm like, cool. I expected this to come in 4 waves like everything else. Great. And other things like Wingspan. It sells really well, and that's great. And prior, like if I had 10 on hand, I had like usually like a month or two's worth, and the shopping was opening up and new stores thing, but I went shopping in 2 days. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Oh great, there isn't anymore. But people had been looking on the website and things because I now have a website because of COVID, which I didn't have before. They were like, oh, you have 10 copies. I'll go in on the weekend. They're all gone.
Womp womp.
And I have no idea when I'll see it again.
Wow.
Like when I saw the name of the panel and I'm like, planning? What planning?
Okay.
Yeah.
That is, yes, I can absolutely see that. So how are you coping? Like what?
We've been really specific on what we are sort of taking orders for from customers. We've been sticking with publishers who have been succeeding. So the people who get us stuff when they say they're going to get it to us, or who keep us well updated on the progress so that if it's late, we know when it's going to be late. And to what extent, so that we can actively manage our customers, because the people who are just like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be here like the middle of September, and I'm still going here like, it still says middle of September and I got nothing. What's going on? Those I stopped doing pre-orders for, because I don't have the funds and the allocation, and when they mysteriously show up, because I am trying to manage all of this, I'm like, I don't have the like financial liquidity to randomly pay for 20 copies of something because it decided to show up the same week as the Magic release. Too bad.
I saw a heck yeah from Jennifer when you said, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. If like publishers need to keep in contact. It's a big thing. And some are great. So I I back a ton of Kickstarters. That's one way that we keep up. We have a lot of competitors in town. A lot of your big publishers do the same thing. You know, there's the whole conversation about pricing.
Yep.
You could spend hours on that.
It's in the box.
Right. So we back a lot of Kickstarters and we sell a lot of accessories because it's one of the things that sets us apart. And we focus on small and new publishers a lot. So when I went to Origins, I found like 3 relatively new or smaller publishers of things that I now brought into the store because none of my other competitors have them. But you have to communicate. So we backed Fantastic Factories Manufactions, like a year and a half ago. And just this week, one of my customers came in, is like, hey, is it in yet? And I'm like, no, it's not in. Let me go check. And so then I saw, oh, people are starting to get them. So I reached out to Deepwater and said, I don't have a shipping number or anything. They actually found it and got right back to me. And then as soon as he sent me the tracking info, like literally the FedEx guy dropped it off. But because I know now, well, I can just reach out to Deepwater and they'll take the time to not only just say, like, I'll look into it, they'll actually look into it and get it for me. Like now they're higher on my list.
Okay.
So that's one of the, if you want to plan, I got to know when it's coming in.
Right. And Jennifer, Scotia had said that there was a shift, that they saw the increase in 2-player games, and now it's as we're coming out of lockdown, where are you seeing the focus for what is selling for you?
You know, I need to run more reports on it because it's hard for me to nail down what's doing best. We do a ton of role playing. We were doing huge Dungeons and Dragons before COVID hit. Like we were running 150 people a week through games and just selling tons of product. That is still a big category for us, but now it's bigger because I've gone deeper on accessories. So that is still doing well for us. I think a lot of people got into it. You can role play online, I think slightly easier than tabletop games online. Like you can do it, it's just a little bit easier. But we also saw painting became huge. Everybody wanted to finally catch up on painting their miniatures.
Yep.
A lot of my D&D players got into it at that time. Indie RPGs are doing better for us. We always did okay, but they're doing better. But those solitary things, because especially in my area, like people are still being very careful. We're doing more, but they're also spending more time at home.
Right.
So we're really seeing kind of that. It's still the interpersonal interaction. I think RPGs are still going to do well for us. It's weird because it's kind of what Scotia was saying. Things are hitting at weird times. And we'll have weeks where we'll get 60, 70 boxes delivered that week. And I'll be like, oh yeah, I ordered this a year ago. And oh, I ordered this last week. And oh, this is the 3-month-old order from there. One huge thing I would love from publishers, especially publishers that go through Kickstarter, like packing slips in the boxes would be amazing. So many Kickstarter fulfillment companies do not put even a simple, you got 3 of this and 2 of this, 1 of that. And if that could even be a shipping packing slip, so it's like, you got 3 of this and here's what you paid for it, like that would be spectacular. I take hours of my week to go back and find those things now, like literally, because you can't put it down on pre-order, right? We can't pre-order things anymore because we don't know when they're going to come in.
Right.
So in the non-pandemic world, the last gamma that I went to was not 20. The last one that you went to, the one before that,
2019, yeah.
2019. I ordered direct from Goodman Games because they had this amazing bundle of things, and lots of people had difficulty getting in things. I used a freight forwarder because they were only using in-state shipping.
Mm-hmm.
It was stuck there for almost a month because there wasn't anything that came with it that said what contents were in it and how much they cost, so they couldn't navigate the border. And
Yeah.
it took me 4 different people of reaching out to, I finally reached out to somebody at Gamma who knew somebody there to get me who their fulfillment was, and 3 different phone calls because they only worked part-time to get me, oh, that information wasn't on or in the box. Oh, and then it took them another 48 hours to actually get me the information of what they put in the box.
I
Yeah.
occasionally piss people off by saying that this industry is about a decade away from being full of grown-ups. But things like that are like, no, if you are shipping product, you put a packing list, you put you put a copy of the invoice. How do you know, as somebody who is pulling things off a shelf, you had a piece of paper in your hand that said 3 of these and 2 of these and 1 of these and 7 of those. You take that piece of paper, you get all your packing material so that the stuff isn't all banged up and destroyed when it gets to the retailer, and then you set it on top.
Yeah, I don't, you're just talking crazy now.
Sorry.
See, I've had like 3 careers before I got to helping game publishers figure out that they should put packing material in the box, or distributors figure out that boxes need to get to the retailer in one piece. So, like, to me, this is obvious. And then you close it all up, and then you put the packing list on top, and then you tape your box.
Yes.
And something that happens too with big orders is like boxes are getting separated in shipments. So if I don't have a packing list and I get 4 of the boxes one day and then 2 the next day and there's one's missing, so I have to track it down. Like just put a piece of paper in the box. Like, please.
Even if it is the same piece of paper that shows up in every box, and you just circle the things that are in this box. You've ordered these 17 items, and this is 3 of these, and 3 of these, and 3 of these. Just set it in there. People,
I mean,
it's
I'm
one sheet of
okay.
paper.
If you put 1 sheet of paper in the 14 box delivery, at least I have the 1 sheet of paper. It takes a lot of time sometimes, especially with the Kickstarter fulfillment stuff, to go find, especially stuff that happened in 2020. Because frankly, my mental health was not great when I was assuming I was going to have to declare bankruptcy.
Right.
So trying to go back and find, okay, what did I order in June? Like, how much of it did I order? What did it actually cost me? Because sometimes when we get the receipts from payment, it's just like, well, you spent $1,500, but it doesn't have the breakdown. So yeah, just having anything like that is enormous.
Okay. I will start beating that drum.
Oh my goodness, please. Yeah.
So as we move into a more stable, I'm not going to say normal, but I feel like things with vaccines and with if we all accept that there's going to be freighters floating on the ocean and products stuck at docks forever, 3 months from now, what do you imagine a publisher is going to have thought about in order for you to pay attention to their new game coming into the store?
So I have a probably fairly different outlook from Jennifer, in the fact that I don't ever do Kickstarters. So it's just a matter of publisher, distributor things. Like, I've kickstarted, I think, 4 things as a store, because with the imports and things, it's just not viable for us. So for us, it's do we know what the product is far enough in advance? So when my supplier is soliciting me for it, do I have some idea of what comes in the box? A great example of this was Tapestry from Stonemaier. When it was solicited, I was told that it would cost more than Wingspan, and would be slightly heavier, and more allocated. And its name. That was it. I didn't have a cost. I didn't have, like, specifically anything. And so it was like, okay, well, most Stonemaier games have done well for me, but not all of them. So how heavy am I going to go into it based upon that? So when you are sending the information to distributors to start soliciting their customers, actually give them information about the game. What kind of game is it? Some art from the inside of it, even if it's mock-ups. not finalized. That's fine. Give me an idea of what you hope this is going to look like.
My brain just exploded at the thought of having something in solicitation where you don't have a sell sheet on file with your distributor. My brain just... Okay, continue.
So sell sheets, yeah, that's good. And if a big thing for me is if I have a hard time taking on new publisher people who without a lot of advance warning and like some good like playthroughs or something to get a feel for it, because there's no built up trust or connection. So do I know that they're actually going to use quality components, or at the last minute is it going to become like super flimsy stuff? Have they actually done their playtesting? A big part of why like Kickstarters weren't a thing for us to start with was that a lot of the stuff that we were getting like inundated with because we had a email address on the internet that said games in it, was we were just getting flooded with all of these things, and we're like, we'd go take a look at it and we're like, none of this actually tells us how this game plays. No. So a big part for, I honestly don't know how a new publisher, like brand new, would get our attention. A lot of it is how consistent were they pre-pandemic, and how are they communicating with me now, to make sure that I can plan and that I can go to my customers and go, hey, I just heard about this thing. Is that of interest to you? To help me go, hey, everybody that I've mentioned this to went, what? I need to order a lot of this, versus no. And then I need to make the decision, is this something that I'm comfortable hand selling?
Right. That makes sense. Jennifer, how about you?
Well, I lost the conversation for a little bit.
The core question was, if a publisher is trying to get your attention and hopes to be in the store 3 months from now, how do they do that?
So there's a couple of good things that are kind of specific to me. If you call the store and ask to talk to me, that's great. But if I tell you I'm busy, I am legitimately busy. Please don't be offended by that. I'll give you my email address and you can reach out to me. But if I say I'm busy and then you keep talking at me, you're getting higher on the list you don't want to be on. I like to see how a game plays, but please don't assume that I have time to go out and watch every how's it played video on the internet. Plus, half of them get rules wrong in the initial video anyway. If you have a video of how your game plays, I'm more likely to watch a video from a publisher than I am from an influencer.
Can I ask a question on that front? I think I know
Yeah.
the answer, and this is a little bit of a leading question, but I assume that if it is a personable person who knows how to teach a game and the game looks decent, they could just shoot it on their cell phone, and it does not need to be a 10 out of 10 production value in order for it to catch your attention.
Yes,
Okay.
100%. Also, you need to learn the difference between demo a game to an end consumer and demoing a game to a retailer. This is especially one of the things I see at game nights at industry conventions. As a retailer, if I am in a game night like thing, I have basically 15 minutes a game,
Right.
right? I have to go see 10 to 15 new games tonight. I don't want to play a full game. If I want to play, I want to play like I just did. I sat in a demo for Yellow's Cora or Hora,
Core. Yep.
and they demoed the first, second, and last rounds. I know how it starts. I know how a normal turn goes, and I know how it ends. Perfect, right?
Yep.
I got the gist of the game. So learning how to demo to a retailer different than demoing to a publisher, and I'm happy to talk with any publisher who wants more insight on that. Because I talk to retailers all the time, and we talk about the fact that that is a skill that a lot of publishers don't have.
I would love to actually schedule a time for you to come and do a broadcast where we go through that and you talk about like great demos
Sure.
you've had. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that's great. Also, I'm a super introvert, so those game nights are really hard on me. So I go through them. So that's kind of how my viewpoint comes.
Excellent.
And then if you want to be in the store in 3 months, go ahead, Scotia.
I was just going to say, to add on to that, the other thing that I would love is sometimes even more than to the point of instead of a sell sheet, but the breakdown of this is how you demo this game, as Jennifer was saying, that is more valuable to me as a tool to take to my staff who cannot, there's too many games coming out. We cannot learn them all. If I'm trying to teach them how to demo something, that breakdown so that they have a reference because they learned 4 other ones this week, and then somebody asks about this one and they're like, because I try and make everybody a specialist on a different thing and be like, hey, let's grab this person. You want to learn about that. But sometimes that person's not working.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be an amazing tool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I know that to publishers, every new game is like a new baby and it's very special to you. But sometimes when we get it down into retailer, we're selling a game as like, oh, it has bits of this game and bits of that game and bits of this one. Because in our consumers' minds, they know how to play Dominion. So if there's a new deck building game that comes out, we can say like, oh, it's got the deck building aspect of Dominion, but it couples it with this kind of aspect. And then this is the new part. This is why this game is special.
Right.
But yeah, if you were to be in a store in 3 months, quick and easy video. The Build Better sales program, I think, is going to be really good. I know right now it's a little more for established publishers, but we're trying to extend that out. A sell sheet that is not the sell sheet you think it is, but is more, here's how you can sell this game, not here's why you can buy this game.
Okay.
Those would all go a really long way. And like case quantities that are reasonable for smaller stores as well as bigger stores. I just saw somebody who their retailer package was you had to buy 100 copies of the game. And I'm like, very few stores can do that. It was an inexpensive game. It wasn't a big game and it wasn't expensive, but still, I don't even buy like 100 boxes of Magic on a release weekend. And I'm a medium-sized store. I consider myself a good medium-sized store. So 100 copies of something, I'm like, I could supply my entire region of stores with that.
Wow, 100 copies has blown whatever thought was in my head right on out of the water.
It was a lot. I read it a couple times because I was like, surely they meant 10. I was like, nope, that's 100 copies. Okay. They changed it down after retailers said, hey, like that's a lot. That's a significant amount of games. But a lot of things too, like I am happy to pay for a demo copy of a game. Okay. I need that demo copy at least by the time the game comes out. I would prefer to have it earlier, but I know logistically that can be difficult. I have received demo games 2 months after they release. I don't care anymore.
Right.
2 months in the land of games right now is an eternity.
Right.
Or my favorite, well, this game releases this day. Here's your demo copy. You got allocated 0 copies from this wave, so your actual copies will be here in 3 weeks to 6 months.
Yeah.
3 weeks to 6 months. I love it.
They don't know, so they're like, 6 months at the worst.
Well, and so with Envoy, we have the conversation starting as soon as Gen Con is over. We're like, okay, so what does your next year look like? What is your Gamma release? What's your Origins release? What's your Gen Con's release? What materials are you producing to go along with it? Are you ready to actually show this to retailers? Are you ready to show this to consumers? And in 2020, the answer was, it's on a boat. It's on a boat. Right. And 2021, it's been, well, it saw a boat on the horizon, but it's not sure it was the right boat, so it's waiting. So for people who are, if you are publishing and if you are kickstarting, for example, just don't, as a publisher, as a small publisher, don't assume anything and make sure that you are padding your timelines and that you are taking into account all these little pieces. The retailer needs to know how to sell the game. The retailer needs to know what's in your dang box. And if you cannot proactively send email to say, hey, you've ordered 5 copies of this game and it's still on a dock in China because there's no container to put it in. If you can't maintain that level of communication, then at least be prepared when your retailers reach out and say, hey, where is it? To provide the deep water level of they summoned the FedEx truck.
Right? Yeah. It was magic.
All right, we are at 10 minutes from the end of the hour. Do either of you have points that you want to land before we start moving towards wrapping up?
Put seams not on the bottom of your box. I know this has nothing to do
God.
with conversation.
Yes.
But if you're
Wait, no, tell me this.
If you're shrink wrapping your games, do not put a seam on the bottom of your box because it will just fall over. Every time I try to face it out, it will fall over. And so then your game will automatically become a spine out game because I can't put your game standing up so people can see it. And put the name of your game on at least 3 sides. It's got to be on the front, it's got to be on the top, and it's got to be on one of the sides. That way I can merchandise it in different ways. But the seam thing is so important. I cannot express the importance of the seam thing.
And do you think that is the manufacturer just doesn't know better and publishers don't think to ask?
Yes, 100%.
That's amazing. Okay.
Pandemic for a while when I first opened was spined.
Yeah.
Because for a while it had the seam on the bottom and the way the components were also how your components are packed in your box matters. If your game is top heavy, it falls over.
Yeah.
We had Smirk and Dagger did Not So Fast that had a beautiful clear opening, right, where you could see the product through the opening, except that the insert would slide down if you put it up so that it was standing up. The insert slid down and covered those components. And the first time I held one in my Jim
Henson's Labyrinth with the amazing articulated minis.
So what I'm hearing is test all of the components in your box, put everything together, and then do the things that a retailer would do with it, including drop it on the floor and see what happens. They don't mean to drop it, but they're dealing with consumers that throw things.
Yes. Yeah, oh man, testing your packaging would be huge. And I'm from California, so games that get over-packaged, I understand that everybody's looking for a shelf presence, but also if I take a game that's mostly air in a big box and sell it to somebody and they open it and they're like, why did I get this box that's mostly air? So I think we're going to see some changes in packaging. I imagine it's going to be like when we went from the giant CD packages down to the little tiny plastic ones. And then, so in California, it's one of the things that we pay attention to because we're always like, how do we recycle? How do we reuse? So just think about it. I don't care if you have a ton of content packed in a smaller box. I will sell that game for you. It doesn't have to be a big box with a deck of cards and some poker chips.
And one of the jokes that we make about Gloomhaven all the time is that it's priced it's better than the price of lobster per pound. If you pack a lot into a little box and make it hefty, people go, oh, when they pick it up. It's surprising. But you don't need all that air. Make them feel like they're getting a lot in this little package and they're blown away. There's a reason the tiny epics were so popular. You get a lot in this little box.
That's funny because in 2015, I attended my first Gamma and got a stern talking to about how important shelf presence was, not from a retailer, from a publisher who told me about how you needed to have a footprint so that you dominated that shelf space. And I was just like, okay. I will check that out.
If your
it depends on if you're going big box or hobby. If you're going Target, you probably need a big shelf presence. But if you're going into stores where they're going to hand sell your games, and that's what we do in hobby stores, we hand sell, we specialize. Like, go into a big box store and go stand in the game aisle and see how long it takes to get somebody to help you. It's not going to happen. But I'm going to hand sell your game. So I care less about what your footprint is. I care about how good your game is.
And if
That's
you have
a fascinating point. Sorry, Scotia, go ahead.
And if you have an amazing game in a smaller box that I can sell the crap out of, I'm going to buy way more because it takes up less warehouse space. It takes up less shelf space. And if I'm selling the crap out of it, I'm going to build a cool ass display with it because it's not going to take this much space for 4 copies. I can put out 20 copies of something this size in the same amount of space, and people walk in and go, "Ooh, what's that?"
Yeah.
Amazing. That is super useful to know. Okay, we are 5 minutes out. So what I would love to do is give each of you an opportunity to tell people where to find you, list your website, send people to go shop on your internet store. So I'm going to start with Scotia.
So Muse N Games, no spaces, .ca, because I'm in Canada. And we're also on all of the socials. So, and it's just amusinggames or without the .ca. So no spaces.
Excellent. Part of the reason that we are all virtual this year is a good 10% of our core attendance is Canadian. And so there are plenty of Canadians in our community.
That's awesome.
All right, Jennifer, where do we find you?
You can find us at shopthesquirrel.com. I'm in a Halloween costume today, not my shop gear. But it's shopthesquirrel.com. That'll get you to anything at the store. And if you're a publisher and you would like to reach out and talk sometime, you can reach me at jenniferward@gamma.org. That's JENNIFERWARD @gamma.org. I check that email every workday. And I am more than happy to reach out to publishers or distributors or other retailers to just talk industry talk. I love it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you took time out of your Sunday and out of your Halloween weekend to come and have this conversation with us. I feel like it was really valuable. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
We love
You're
you,
welcome.
Avi.
Yeah. Absolutely.